Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show. This is Multifamily Chronicles, and I'm your host, Adrian Daniela. Our guest today is Barbara Savona. Barbara is the CEO co-founder of Sprout Marketing. Welcome to the show, Barbara.
Thank you, Adrian. I'm so happy to be here.
Barbara, let's start by introducing yourself to the audience. Tell us a little bit about your background, professional, personal background.
Okay, all right. Well, personally, I think sometimes people are surprised to learn that I am half German and half Mexican. So I always joke around that I'm a Germex. So my mom's from Germany, my dad is from Mexico. So they are both to this country, immigrants to this country. And so I grew up speaking Spanish first, German second, English was my third language. And I feel like that formed a lot of just my personality, going to two completely different cultures and seeing that growing up and being exposed to that. And so now kind of something fun about me personally too. My husband built us a home in the Texas Hill Country in a shipping container. So we live in a house that's made up of 3 shipping containers, a lot of metal, a lot of glass, kind of cool. So I'm a fan of housing and all those, obviously I'm in this industry, but I personally love architecture and housing as well. So that is a little bit about my personal life. I have chickens and pigs and, all the animals at my house. And professionally, I have been in this industry a little over 20 years. A little over maybe 22 years. And I started out as a property manager, or on the property management side. I started out in leasing, and I've kind of grown in the industry. And then 13 years ago, I launched a marketing agency called Sprout Marketing. And that is what I do every day now. I help property managers and management teams with their marketing and their retention efforts.
Barbara, how did you end up in property management?
Okay, so honestly, we have probably a connection with my dad. Started out as a maintenance man at an apartment community, and just his property manager gave him so many opportunities. He learned so many things, and it was more like, because he proved himself to be a really good worker, he got to do a lot of supervising then eventually. And my mom did make readies. She helped clean make readies. So I remember being little and doing my homework while my parents were getting an apartment ready. So I kind of think it was in my, in my DNA to do this. Now, years later, they became entrepreneurs. My dad took that experience and built a company out of it with my mom by his side. And so by the time that I was ready to start college, I knew that I wanted to, get a discount on my rent. And so I started leasing apartments, and that was kind of as a way to, balance out what I was doing financially. And I just love the industry. 6 months after I started leasing, my manager got sick, and they asked me, I was working for Greystar, they asked me to fill in as the temporary manager. And it was kind of like no looking back after that. So I got my start just, leasing, quickly became a property manager, and then have done all the different things in between. So I've had like a very fast career in multifamily. I never planned to stay here, but I just loved it, and I'm glad that I made that choice. I'm on a different side of things, but I'm glad that I'm here.
Barbara, what made you switch, first of all, from management side to the vendor side? And after that, what made you consider a career on your own, opening your own shop?
Yeah, so I actually was working as a regional supervisor, and I was kind of recruited. I had someone come in that was working for an apartment magazine that they were launching, and they were looking for somebody to be their like face, their salesperson, and their kind of, it ended up being that I almost ran that entire production of this magazine in Dallas. So the opportunity was there. I was ready for a bit of something challenging. And I always have had the entrepreneurial blood, because I did grow up with my parents both being self-employed eventually. So that was always my long-term plan. And by getting that experience on the vendor side, I felt like I needed to understand both sides of the coin. And so I had done the property management side. I wanted to do the marketing side. So I helped launch magazines. I worked for Rent Media Solutions, which is now CoStar. And that was just really a good experience. And then In 2009, when the recession hit, we were visiting my grandparents in Germany, and they have like a farm. They were dairy farmers. And I was sitting outside on the roof at night, all the stars. And I was just thinking that I was ready for something different and I wanted to do something on my own. And I think that travel and just getting out of your environment, it gives a lot of like room for creativity. And so because I wasn't in the day to day and I was taking this break and I was around nature and just around a different culture, you start to see what is possible. So I came back to the States, talked to my husband, I talked to a few friends and colleagues in the industry. And they just were my cheerleaders. They said, do it, we will hire you, try it. And so I didn't know exactly what the business was going to be, but I decided to take the leap. It was very scary because it was in the middle of the recession. I had a really good paying job and I was nervous, but I'm very thankful that that I did. And it's been an incredible blessing in my life.
Barbara, what does it take to run a successful business?
I think there's a lot, and I think everybody, it's like, how you can have a lasagna recipe and then someone else can have an incredible lasagna recipe, but have different ingredients. I feel like what you bring to the table as an entrepreneur is like this mix of all of these ingredients. So I think one is just your experiences in life. Like I mentioned, what I have seen extreme poverty in Mexico. I have seen incredible technology in Germany. I have known being a kid that doesn't speak the language. I understand that. Those experiences kind of created qualities that, I think they were difficult in some things to see. And so I think being patient for me has been huge, even though I'm not patient by nature, but I have learned to be patient, being resilient. I think being joyful. I think being joyful even when things are hard. I like to be happy, and so I find that if I want to be joyful, it allows me to be resilient during hard things and hard times. And as an entrepreneur, you're going to be knocked down over and over again. So I think those things. I also think being able to put on a hat that says everything is an experiment. I am not a failure if this doesn't work. This is just an experiment. We're trying it. And so I learned that about 5 years in, that I used to take everything so defeated. Oh, this happened. And oh, I'm such a failure. No, now I tackle something. I say, I'm going to try it. If it works, awesome. If it doesn't, I'm going to tweak it, keep trying. And I feel that having that experiment mindset is really huge when you're a business owner, because, you never know what's going to get thrown at you.
That's a fascinating story. And such, so many great pieces of advice. One thing that I wanted to pick up on was what you describe as being, your background from your family heritage, right? You're looking at, Mexico with economical struggles on the other side, a lot of technology and, very modern society in Germany. I think what I gave you was perspective, right? A different
Very
perspective.
nice.
I I myself, I'm not born here, so I come with about 28 years of different perspective. Grew up in communism, then after communism, we have a lot of freedom. People were very disoriented, trying to figure out what to do with so much freedom and economical struggles and everything. But that's something that really really helped me. I think I have a different way to look at things than most people that don't have this type of experience. So I can completely relate with what you just described with your perspective.
I can see that. And it's really neat because, one of the things that the lessons I learned that I love about housing is, at least what I saw, it didn't matter if you were in poverty or if you had a lot, people still want the same things for their families. They want them to have a nice home. They want them to have a nice life. They have goals, they have aspirations. And I love that. And I think that when I saw that even in property management, I've managed C&D assets, those people, they still cared about their home. It wasn't, just because they didn't have the nicest amenities, they still wanted it to be nice. And so to me, that's what I love about home. It's kind of like this great equalizer. We all need a place to call home, and it will always serve as the backdrop of life. And that perspective is really nice to know, what, not everybody has the same advantages. And we as property management professionals, we have the opportunity to impact a lot of people in very small ways, but they're meaningful.
housing, your home is very, very personal. When you think about it, it's only very close friends and family that enter that space with you, that you share the space with occasionally, I'll say for the most part. And when you think about our workers, especially maintenance workers, right, that they allow in our residence homes because they had to do repairs, they can't just do it remotely. There has to be right there a level of trust and a level of professionalism that we have to project upon our residents in order to earn their trust, just because there's such a small number of people that have access to their homes, and we're included in that. So this brings me to my next question. Do you see any value into service teams being used from a marketing perspective to market a product, a community, an apartment community? Do you see any value in that?
I absolutely do. So I would venture to say that whether someone is actively using their maintenance team as marketing or not, they are your marketing team. They really are. I mean, they're going to be one of the biggest factors. I think about that oftentimes, that it's not, people don't always remember when things are going right. They remember when things are going wrong and how you respond to that, So if the experience is positive in a time of crisis, I sometimes think that's more impactful than just doing all the things right all the time. We remember, oh, that was challenging, but man, it went smooth. So to me, the maintenance, you said it beautifully. It's like, you don't let anybody into your home, yet with maintenance, sometimes we just have to. How incredible if we can introduce our maintenance team, if we can help build that level of trust. And my experience when I was a property manager, I remember specifically one of my maintenance team members that we just clicked so well. I felt we were like a power couple. It was like mom and dad, kind of like, we knew everything that was going on. And it was really great. We didn't have social media at that time, but if we did, to me nowadays, showcasing that level of trust, showcasing what a maintenance team member does and how they're trained and what what their background is. A lot of our maintenance team members, we think what they can do in an apartment, but some of these people are just people that are so talented in so many ways. They have charisma, they have personality. And I feel like many times we miss out because we don't put them in front of a camera. We don't sometimes, and not everybody will feel comfortable, but that's where, as the property manager or as a marketer, you kind of can look and say, okay, this maintenance team member, he's really funny. We could use him to do some fun videos that showcase how things can, what not to put in your garbage disposal. Or this one is very serious, but he has a lot of experience. He might be a good one just to introduce a picture and to share some facts about them. And so what we're doing is we're building trust in the team that is handling such an intimate place of someone's life, which is their home. And I think that if you're not doing that, man, you're missing out.
I would love to one day to fly to Texas and team up with you and go to some apartment communities and talk to some maintenance personnel, to some service professionals out there, and find a few that are really comfortable on a camera that we will like to showcase and actually do that and just show how much value that type of content can bring to a community and even to a management company. When you're looking at marketing in general, this is I like to really get your take on this, right? Most of the marketing that's done, especially the larger the corporation, the more sanitized content you'll see. I mean, it's very, very sanitized, very neutral. We're not, offending anyone. We have to be very as neutral as we can. But I think by trying to do that, and I understand the reasons behind it, right? A large company has a target on their back. Everybody's looking at possibly, a lawsuit. And I completely get the liability part. But then the message that comes through, it's a very watered down message. It feels like plastic. It feels like, you go to a restaurant and, you're looking at food and you say, I really love this food. Let me order it, right? Let me order this course. So when you taste it, it tastes like plastic. It looks great in a picture, but the taste is plastic. This is kind of the feeling that I'm getting when I'm looking at marketing of a large corporation. And this goes outside of multifamily too. But especially in multifamily, I see a lot of cookie cutter type of stuff that's flooding the internet. What's your take on that, Barbara? Do you agree? Do you disagree? What's your opinion on what I just said?
Well, I like your analogy. I think that's so good. I mean, it's like if I think that's such a thing, watered down. And I just watch my own patterns of my own marketing. And when I have very polished marketing, it appeals to some. So I think there's different vehicles, right? Like if somebody comes and they want to watch a training, they're going to want a sense of professionalism in the moment for that. So I also think you have to know your platform. But I agree with you. When one of my highest watched videos on Instagram, I was literally walking and talking and kind of talking through some things. And it wasn't like I was the best dressed up that day. I wasn't even planning on doing it. And I really think it's because there was movement, there was action. They could see there was real feeling behind it. So I think there's this balance. And that's where I think the struggle is, right? We have to have, in a world where everything is getting canceled and like nobody can make a mistake anymore, which I don't agree with personally. I mean, it's like we're human, we're going to make mistakes. I understand the liabilities, but I think that people don't connect with logos, they connect with people. And so when things are too staged, people can see that. And you can see on why is it that authentic content is what is getting engagement? Because that's what people want to see. Like they know when they're being sold to. So I think that there can be a mix of, I always say the website is like your mom and dad. Everybody needs the parent that's going to tell you what is what, your policies, your procedures. And social media is a little bit like the fun aunt or uncle. And that's my role. Like I'm the fun aunt in my family. And I think, sometimes you as the fun aunt maybe say things in front of the kids that you're not supposed to. And then you're like, oops, I'm sorry. Don't tell your mom. And so I think social is just a little bit more where it can be like that. And so I do think you have to know who your team is and know their personalities and have boundaries in place. But I think that can be super effective when you let people bring their personality to the marketing.
One other thing that I used to say about the super sanitized content is that it has no soul.
Yeah.
It's soulless.
Yes.
And the best example for the value that's into, let's say, unstaged raw content is that when you look at consumption from a consumer standpoint, how much regular TV channels are being consumed nowadays versus what's the consumption on YouTube. And you're talking about people that are recording themselves playing video games. And not only that, but they get millions of views and they're making millions of dollars.
Right.
That's not happening by accident. It's actually the behavior of the consumer nowadays. So that alone should probably make a lot of companies out there considering a mix. I don't think it's a either or type of situation. Just like you, I completely agree that it has to be the right mix. But then just introduce something that looks like less staged, less edited, more natural, that comes from the heart, from people that are passionate about the work that they do. I think that just sells like crazy.
100%. And you actually said it. Sometimes people ask me, like, I want to be a better marketer. How do I become a better marketer? And I always say, watch your behavior. Watch what when Black Friday was coming, I paid attention to what emails did I immediately delete versus which ones did I save. When I'm listening to a TV show, the other day I stopped, normally you fast forward and what commercials make me stop and actually watch the commercial, and what you said is exactly right. We're seeing how people want to consume content. If we're just stubborn and try to do it the old way, well, we're going to get the old results. But if we adapt because we're watching it, and again, that's where that experiment mindset comes in. It's like, maybe give your team a little bit of leeway, a little bit of freedom, and try it. See what happens. If the results are there, then it gives you a little bit more confidence to keep going down that path. You don't have to take off all the barriers, but try a little bit. And really, if we're trusting people to go into their other people's homes, I think we can trust them to do a little bit of social media content too. I mean, right? Like where's the balance there?
Exactly. That's a great point. If you're trusting me, just trust me all the way.
Right.
Why not just trust me all the way? Barbara, you also have a podcast. You are a podcast host. Tell us a little bit about your podcast.
Yeah, so the podcast started, I think a little bit over close to 3 years now, Marketing Home, Marketing You. We're almost at 100 episodes. I started it as a way to really connect with other industry professionals. And then I decided that I didn't want just industry professionals. I wanted people outside the industry as well that could kind of help with different things. So you'll find on there, guests like CEOs that have done incredible things, but you'll also find property managers that are just really good at what they do. And I want to hear their stories too. I do a lot of solo episodes too. Those are almost more like, let's do a marketing class together. And I try to teach just a lot of the principles. I'm a principle kind of a person. I don't love to talk on trends a little, but I like to talk on principles. I think those don't go out of style. So the podcast has just been a way for me to kind of share that information. I used to do a lot of speaking events, and I just don't really like to be away from home as much anymore. So I don't do that as much. And this has been actually a way for me to reach a way bigger audience, to do a little bit of mentoring, which I like to do. I just don't have the time to do as much one-on-one as I'd love. So I try to kind of view the podcast as like, if I was just starting in this industry, what are the kind of things that I'd want to know? And then if I'd been in it for 20 years, what are the resources that I need? So like, we recently had a psychologist on talking about resiliency, how to actually build it. We have Bill Nye talking leadership and different things like that. So I'm excited I've got some great people lined up, but I like to still connect with, I want to connect with the on-site teams too. I love I feel sometimes like those are the people that are actually doing the day-to-day, and I love to hear from them. So you'll find a lot of those guests on my podcast as well.
I had to share right here with the audience that I made a point to listen to a few of your episodes, in preparation of the show, just to get to know you better before we actually meet for the first time via video. And I've been fascinated by it. I couldn't stop listening to it. So there were several episodes, and I picked different topics, whether they were educational in marketing, especially where your conversations with Bill. By the way, he's a phenomenal individual, and I'm very fortunate that he agreed to come on my show as well. I had an episode with Bill. I hope to get him back out here soon for another episode. It's just fascinating stuff to me. There's just so much information. They're so educational, and they're so entertaining at the same time. Like they're not just something like boring that you say, hey, I'm gonna sit here for 25 minutes because I really need this information, but otherwise they're boring. So they're great. I do encourage everybody to follow your podcast. Everybody that's watching, you're not going to regret it.
Oh, I appreciate that vote of confidence. I'm going to try to keep them not boring. We don't want anything too snooze-worthy.
Yeah, just keep up the great work, because it's definitely fantastic. You have a great thing going right there. I want to stay with a podcast a little bit, Barbara, and ask you: do you find any benefits in having a podcast? Does that help you with building your personal brand, your company brand? Does that help with your business? And if it does, just share, if you don't mind, a few ways in which it helps you.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I first started the business 13 years ago, speaking on stages was the only way to get your name and your brand out there. And I did that a lot. I did it at first for free. And then once I proved myself, I, was paid to do it. And I still do some of that sometimes. But you really only impact the few hundred people that might be in the room. And with the podcast, first of all, to me, my strategy has always been, I want people that are like-minded and connect with me because we just mesh well together. And I want new ideas and I want their ideas. So this was a great way to says, if somebody is going to spend time with you listening to a podcast, whether they're driving or walking their dog or it's in the back while they're doing something, to me, that's a huge level of trust. And I have seen my downloads grow over the years, especially this year. I really feel like podcasting kind of hit multifamily, even though I've been doing it for a couple of years before. It feels like this year it really landed. And so what typically happens is people will listen to a couple and they'll say, hey, I like this girl's style. I like how she teaches. I like the people that she aligns with. And then they'll go in and they'll join my free, I do a free membership. And my biggest business builder has really been an email list. So kind of sharing some of my strategies, it's been educate, because I feel when you give people those tools, they're so excited and thankful that they're learning something. And I'm just kind of sharing stuff that I've learned. And when I teach it, it reinforces it to me. So it's like a very big win-win. I'm learning from others. So then they might join my email list. And then after that, they get nurtured. They kind of get more information. I don't overshare stuff. I'm not a huge like hard sales pusher, but I've seen it's just like this funnel. So people come to the podcast, they then join and learn more. And then once they're there, what's really nice about it is everything that I share on the podcast is what my business is about. So there's no surprises when they become a member. It's just more of the resources that they want. So I found it to be a great way to qualify prospects and leads, and a lot easier than going to trade shows. And I still do some of that, but I feel like the podcast has given me a larger vehicle, a larger voice, a larger audience.
Definitely. I was just talking to one of my other guests, like this is literally 2 days ago, and I said to him the same thing. I said, one of the reasons why I'm excited about the opportunities that a podcast brings is that a conversation between the two of us is just the two of us witnessing. A conversation in front of a audience of 200 people or 1,000 people reaches 1,000 people, and that's it. A conversation that's recorded on on a Zoom call, whatever way you have it recorded, and put it up on a YouTube, could gain hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of views, or millions if you get if it's very interesting and you get lucky. So there's also there to stay in perpetuity. If you put that out there and you never mess with it, you don't delete it, like it's there to stay. And some of the content is relevant not just today, but it could be relevant. It's like evergreen content, right? It's relevant years from now.
Absolutely. That's such a good point. It's like it gives you a place to kind of a stake in time, and it like you're saying, you're getting that reach without doing the work afterwards. It's just there, and it's there to be found. And the other thing that I have found is also, like, for example, you and I have not met before. We are meeting here for the first time. We've been connected on LinkedIn, but after you spend an hour with someone on a podcast, you feel like you're friends with them. And so then your network, it goes from just a LinkedIn, hi, thumbs up, insightful, to like, now I'll know a little bit about you, you know about me. And to me, the reach that then that has is huge. It's enriching to yourself personally, but then it also builds your brand as well.
Yeah, it certainly does. I completely agree with what you just said, because my experience has been, excuse me, has been the same. For all of the guests that I have on my podcast, there's already a relationship that's being built. And most of my guests on a podcast, I never met in real life. Most of them, with a very few exceptions, probably 5 to 10 exceptions out of almost 50 episodes, we never met in person. So it's pretty amazing, right? It's pretty amazing. And I am a connector by, I guess it's just who I am. I love connecting people and connecting with people. So every time I had someone, a guest on my podcast, I get excited because I get to spend an hour with you. I mean, I bet that not so many people outside of your close circle get that opportunity. So for me, it's humbling too, for someone to commit for an hour to sit down with me and just have a conversation about whatever. It's a big deal to me. It's very important. So I take that very seriously, and I'm very grateful for it.
Me too.
So Barbara, next thing I want to touch on this labor shortage crisis, right? Companies are hurting out there. They're hurting in a big way. Multifamily, especially, I think our turnover rates employee turnover, they're probably very, very close to hospitality, which hospitality is crazy, is like completely out of control. So I did some numbers, I did some research for a presentation that I've done a couple of months ago, and we're right there. Like the turnover rates are incredible, and also the shortages. You're talking about probably 30 to 40% of the site of the site positions currently are not filled; they're vacant. So I wanted to get your take on the whole phenomenon. How if you have an opinion of how we got here into this situation that we're in currently, and then secondly, how can marketing help companies with their recruiting efforts to bring people in?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think that the pandemic really highlighted, it made people pause and kind of look at their life and look at how their employers were treating them and how, fulfilled they were. So I think for some, it was enough of a pause to take a look at what's going on and decide that they didn't want to be treated the way that they were, or felt undervalued, or just wanted a totally different change. And the other thing I think that's happening is now, with a lot of leadership being on LinkedIn, people can see how other leaders are treating their teams. So there's not this like isolation. I know not everybody uses that, but some people do use that as like, you need this job, you need me. And I think people are starting to see their value, and they're starting to see that there's other leaders that they are maybe more interested in working for, or places that will be more meaningful or more fulfilling. So maybe unpopular opinion, I say, if you are experiencing that, first, what accountability as a management company can you take for yourself? Why are we here, right? Because there's some companies that are not facing that. And that's the truth. I mean, there's just some that aren't. So why? What is different? And then there's some that are, just because of their magnitude, they're so big that of course they're being impacted. So I think it's like, first, personal accountability of like, what have we done that maybe has made people not feel valued, or not feel appreciated, or felt like they could be replaced with anybody else. And then when it comes to marketing, I think absolutely you can have the best marketing campaign for hiring, but if your culture doesn't match, then your retention isn't going to be there, right? So like, the marketing has to match, or else people feel like they've been catfished, like it's like a trick. And so what do I think is good marketing? I think if you have a really good culture, show it. I love seeing leaders, on LinkedIn showing what they're doing, because it is a recruitment effort. 2 years ago, Tony Sousa and I had a conversation about marketing to recruit. And it's like, he's done a phenomenal job, because that's just who he is. Like, it wasn't fake. He's a good marketer too, but that's really who he is. And he's showing his leadership style. And, when you think about that, it's like, you as a leader can show your leadership style. And this is also where I think there's like kind of a divide. There's the company, and then there's the leader, and the leader can go anywhere. And if the leader builds a loyal following, that's what I think a personal brand can do. You as the leader will not have a recruiting problem. And I think that's what's really an incredible opportunity. So a management company should embrace people that are showing up and building, because really they're helping build the culture of the company. And rather than stifling them, because I know there's some companies that are intimidated when their employees get a voice on LinkedIn. To me, I would say, how do we make them so excited that they want to be brand ambassadors, that they want to, that we're really supporting their efforts, that we're going to get the benefits of that, of that. And so it can be a synergistic type of a relationship, where a company benefits from a leader actively recruiting by just being the kind of leader that he or she is, and showing it. So I think marketing is huge, and it's beyond pizza parties. It's, giving people meaningful work. It's letting people have a certain autonomy. It's, what's important to that individual. How can you help align what they're really wanting in life, help them get there, and they're going to be committed. And so I think there's so many layers, but those are just a few of like my initial thoughts on recruiting and marketing.
I love everything that you just said, especially the last part, the one with the one with leaders kind of being out there and putting, just letting people know what they're doing, right? Just bringing them in on their journey. And you also mentioned Tony Sousa. So Tony is probably the best example that I have in multifamily of how an industry influencer. I'm gonna call him that way because he is an industry influencer. There's no doubt about it. The traction that he gets, his charisma and the way he leads, people are in love with us. He's like a magnet. He attracts. So, Barbara, my next question is, do you think that there would be a good practice for companies to look for industry influencers and hire them to help with their company brand, with their recurring efforts, and with marketing in general, like improving their brand, associating themselves with influencers' brands by hiring them, so then their brand, increases in value, in visibility?
Yeah, I don't know about necessarily going out and hiring an influencer, right? Like for that purpose. But if I was hiring for someone, if I was right now looking and I was hiring, I would definitely consider what kind of a presence someone has and what kind of a reputation they have built. I think when I think of the word influencer, some people kind of get like, oh, that's such a word, but influence is really just that you've gotten enough trust that people are going to be influenced by what you say. That means that you hold sway. It's the new sales, that's how we influence. So I wouldn't specifically hire someone just as an influencer. I would look for someone that has taken the initiative to build their own brand, who has carved out influence in our space, and say, I want someone like that, because that shows a lot of initiative, it shows a lot of drive, and definitely, that's someone that you want to align yourself with. At the same time, I will say that a company could also look at that person and say, will they be loyal to my brand? Like, how, and that's where I think the alignment piece has to be really good, right? So it has to be that that company and that influencer, that person that holds influence, are so aligned that it makes sense, that they're going to want to talk about it. Because the second that somebody starts talking about a company or a brand inauthentically, we were talking about this a little bit off camera, like people can feel it. And so if you just hire somebody for that, it's like, I just want to hire somebody that has these qualities built in, because if they align with my model, they're the kind of people that you can't keep quiet, because they just love to talk about things that they love and they're passionate about. So that's kind of my approach to that.
And I want to be very specific, like explain by industry influencers, I meant a person that's a very accomplished professional in the industry already. So first of all, they're qualified for whatever position they're applying for, but they're bringing more to the table than just the expertise, being the expert matter, like the director of operation, the vice president of operation, the regional maintenance director, whatever the title is. So they are that person. They're very competent in their field, right? But they're also bringing a audience, I should say, right? Just people that trust them, that respect them, and they follow them. So then when they're coming into this, company, they're becoming a part of the company, then they're raising awareness about what's going on at the company. So by influencers, I wasn't necessarily thinking that an influencer in general, like someone that does, like, it's an influencer for living, they're using their personal brand to help sell products.
Right.
That could be a part of it, but the main part still has to be that they're competent in a work that they do.
Yeah, and I think as an entrepreneur, as a leader, as an owner, this is the other thing that I would add to that, is I would say I would sit down with that person and ask, like I would any candidate, what's your ultimate goal? Where are you wanting to go? And make sure that our paths are going to align there as well, so that that it is, what are their ultimate goals, and can they align behind our brand? And people don't know, nobody stays at a company now forever. So we're not looking for that. We're just looking for that influence. And the other side to that coin is, I also think influencer marketing to lease apartments can be very successful from the other side. So I think having an influencer in a space that you do a trade or for an apartment type of a thing, and they're showcasing their lifestyle, I think that's kind of a very cool way. And again, there's different boundaries there, because it's just like having your maintenance team do a video. When you have an influencer that's posting pictures, there's got to be guidelines because they're coming back to your brand. All of it, comes back to the brand. And I think that is, as the business owners and management companies, is just where we have to make sure that we're on the same page.
You brought influencer marketing, and that would be the next topic that I wanted to ask you at a broader scale. Besides helping to rent apartments, can you think of different ways where influencers will be very efficient in doing marketing for any sides of the industry? It could be the operational side where, obviously they're selling apartments. You already covered that. But it could be the vendor side, for example, someone that is very trusted within the space, and they they endorse different products or different services. Just like I'll make a parallel with Instagram, right? With Instagram influencers that they're helping sell a variety of products or services. Do you think that happening? Do you see that happening? Like, is it something that you see happening soon? Like it's happening already? It will happen in a near future, or you don't think that will necessarily touch the multifamily space much?
I think it's happening in a different way already. It's kind of like we were talking about even with our podcast. I think when people align with your brand, there's a level of influence there. So for example, if someone trusts me with their marketing and then I recommend another vendor or a program, there's a level of trust there. I think that that happens a lot. I see that with even speakers within the industry, like Lisa Trozine. She's very honest. She's always very sharing some of her, insights and thoughts. And there are, partnerships. Where I think it gets tricky is kind of like the Instagram influencer, like you said, right? When you know that someone is getting paid for their influence, there's always that question of, is it genuine, or is it just something that is getting paid? And so, for a lot of the way that it is right now, you have to trust that the individual is only going to bring to the table, things that are trustworthy. So I think that we'll see it in different ways. And I think kind of as careers develop, I'm curious to see, even with some of the LinkedIn, influencers and personalities, does that become a career on its own? Does that become like, I'm trialing different products, and I'm not saying me, but that the influencer is trialing different products and they're partnering with different brands and they're showcasing that in a really real way. I think it's going to take a unique person to do it. And I think they're going to have to be very trusted. But I could see that happening. I mean, I feel like people love to get behind people, when they get excited about it. So yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely a possibility.
Barbara, branding. You help brands all the time. That's what you do for a living. I want to focus on personal branding. How important is in today's society, and especially in a labor market, is to have everybody has a brand. Everybody is a brand. Let's just make it very clear here. Whether it's intentional or unintentional, if you're not building your own, somebody else is gonna build it for you. They're gonna picture in any colors that they want, that they desire. Yeah. Unless you take action and you build your own, the way you want to be perceived. So do you see value in investing in personal brands, like having a presence on LinkedIn, posting over there, interacting with other posts, sharing knowledge on LinkedIn? Do you see that as being seen as valuable for someone in order to, I guess, lend a career opportunity to help them with their career now or in the future, or both?
1,000%. Now and the future, forever. I think that, so my response to that has been kind of something I talk about a lot, which is betting on yourself. And, I think that for us, think about it, for example, if people feel safe putting their money in a bank and knowing that they're going to get a certain percentage of a return. When you invest in yourself, there's actually no cap on the return on investment. There's none. The cap is you. The cap is your potential, your work ethic, all of that. So when you start building your personal brand, I see that as this investment that you're making in yourself that says, I don't care where I end up landing. You know, when I started as a leasing agent, I didn't think that 22 years later, I would have a business that gives me incredible freedom. But that was because I built a reputation, which is what I equate to a brand. You know, now it takes a lot more. It's very intentional. You're really thinking about, you know, how do I want to be perceived? Am I what kind of a thought leader am I? When people think about me, what do I want to, you know, what do I want to come to mind? So I think that there's huge value. Just say that you forever, you know, want to work in this industry, where you can go is limitless. And let's say that you don't want to be in this industry, you want to be your own entrepreneur. That is also a possibility, but a lot of it is one connection away. What, you know, I'll read something that somebody posts and I'll see, oh my gosh, we could be the perfect partnership for this idea. And all of a sudden you've got this web of networks. So my, you know, my advice would be, think about the things that people always come to you for. So for me, you know, when I really started thinking about that, people would come to me for a plan. It was always like, how do I distill down an idea and like relate it to what we're doing? You know, I would troubleshoot and say, okay, here's what we can do. And here's an organized, very systematic way. And I kind of started to see my friends did the same thing. Oh, I'm going through this. What do you think I should do? And I'd be like, let's make a plan. We can do it. So I just took that and that became my methodology. You know, I like classics, so that became my methodology. So I would say really pause and say, what do people come to me for? What's my fun quality? What knowledge do I have? And then start just talking about those things, post about those things, share those things. You know, day to day, look for stories that are happening in your life, take a picture, you know, have an experience, and intentionally build the brand that you want. You might not be thinking about where you're going to be 10 years from now, but if you're putting that work in now, the opportunities open to you 10 years from now are going to be huge. So I think, yes, do it and don't be scared. And it's an experiment mindset. Try some stuff, see what works. But I definitely think it's worth the effort.
Yeah, I happen to agree with you 100%. Time will tell if we're right or wrong.
Yeah, that's right. We'll see.
We'll see. This is gonna stay on YouTube forever. So we're gonna go back and watch 5-10 years from now to see if we were right or not about this.
I love it.
Barbara, next section of this conversation is I have a few rapid fire questions for you.
Okay.
Ready?
Let's do it.
Books. What are your favorite books? Fiction, nonfiction, professional books?
Okay, I have them here because I wanted to be able to show. So I love Behavior Change, Tiny Habits by BJ Fogg, and Atomic Habits. This is more scientific. This is more actionable, Atomic Habits. So this to me is huge. I also love this kind of older, like Tool of Titans from Tim Ferriss. I think it's so cool that you can learn little tidbits from like the most, you know, incredible people. For people that want to scale their business, Scaling Up is one of my favorite. And that one is by Vern Harnish. I will share two other ones. One on leadership, like really good one on leadership and why certain things aren't working in your culture. There's a book called Leadership and Self-Deception by the Arbinger Institute. We read it and my whole team has gone through it. And the other one is 4,000 Weeks by Oliver Burkeman. That one is more about life and the way you're spending your time. So good.
Thank you. Excellent recommendations. And I wanted to say that the Tools of Titans, it's one of my absolute favorites.
Me too.
Just like what one of my previous guests said, Jack Daly, model the masters.
Yes.
You want success, model the masters. And that book right there, you just have to read it and just follow a few things, not all the things that you're finding in a book. And you'll find success, you know, way faster than you would without reading it. Let's talk about failure, Barbara. How did a failure or apparent failure help you for future success in your career?
That's a really good question. So early on when I started Sprout, I landed a really big client. They were my client for 5 years and they had a change in leadership and I lost a $20,000 a month client. And that was huge at the time because, you know, my team, all this, you know, revenue, I knew it was coming. I had 30-day notice and I thought it was going to be the worst thing. what ended up happening is I actually didn't like working for that client. We were not aligned in the way we did business. It was always a struggle. Losing them, seeing that we were fine on the other side, that we had to figure things out, it created a different way of doing business for me. And it gave me the freedom to say, I want to work with people that we're a match for and not be a hostage to any kind of a client, no matter how much billing. So it was like a huge failure turned into opportunity moment for me.
That's a great story out there. What advice would you have for a young person getting ready to enter the real world, right out of high school or college?
Okay, this one is probably going to be not what you expect, but I would say if you want real freedom, don't get in debt. So I have worked really hard to be a debt-free person as long as I can. And I feel that that's what gives you a lot of freedom. You don't have to take on every opportunity. You don't have to say yes to every single thing. You don't have to constantly work. It allows you the freedom to make some decisions. So if possible, don't owe anyone anything. That gives you a lot of flexibility.
That's a great piece of advice. It's not something that you would learn in school for sure.
Right. It's very unconventional, especially nowadays.
Exactly. Barbara, in the last 3 years, what belief, behavior, or habit has improved your life the most?
So I grew up in a time where, I thought that I had to say yes to every single thing. I thought that I had to give everyone my time equally and be available to everyone. And for me, the pandemic was the slowdown time. And I realized a need for rest and also a need to kind of keep my circle tight and then give time to others in a way that felt very generous and authentic to me, but not in a way that burned me out. So I'm not going to respond in 5 seconds to an email, a DM. That's not who I am. But when I do respond, I respond thoughtfully and I align with people. So I don't try to expand. So I guess the biggest change is it's okay to say no, and it's okay to take a rest. Like the earth needs rest, we need rest, and constantly going 24/7, which I did for many years, is a quick route to burnout. At least that was my experience. So that's a new thing for me, rest.
Barbara, when you feel stressed out, overwhelmed, what do you use to get out of that state of mind, and what do you use to get back on track?
Okay, so for the immediate, I always say change your environment. So that and walking. If I can go for a walk, get outside, it immediately clears my head. I actually invested in a treadmill in my office. So when I'm feeling that like moment, I just get on there for 10 minutes. I put on my tennis shoes and I'm in a different state of mind. But to sit down, every week I keep a frustration list. And so anything that is frustrating that week, I write it down and I don't try to tackle it in the moment. But on Fridays, I spend an hour every Friday looking at that list. And then I look for the week ahead and say, was it that I booked too many appointments? Was it that I wasn't prepared? Where was my frustration? And how do I not repeat it next week? And so that has helped me a lot with overwhelm, because I find that I'm not making the same mistakes over and over again because I'm taking time each week to study myself. And I think that's a huge lesson, is take time to study yourself and your behavior.
Barbara, in closing, because we're about to bring this to a closing right now, unfortunately.
You did so good.
Unfortunately, I wish we could have kept going for a lot longer. Is there anything that, a question that you wish I would have asked, I didn't, or is there anything that you would like to share with the audience that you didn't have the opportunity to do during our conversation?
Well, I think you asked some beautiful questions, and I have loved just getting to know you. And I think that if my message to our industry would be is, we've done things one way for many, many years, and many people are feeling burnt out. One of the privileges that I have is because I'm not a supervisor to the teams. Managers feel very free to share with me and my team their real challenges. They are overwhelmed, overworked, undersupported. And I think that the reality is that just my message would be, if you're in a role of leadership, stop and see how your people are really, really doing. And if you're on site, whether it's the maintenance team or it's the property management, I would say keep investing in yourself, know your value, set your boundaries and align with a company that really knows what you're worth. I know that's probably like, people get in trouble for saying stuff like that, but I just feel like our lives are just very filled with a lot of challenges that I hope that we can do work that we all love. And then getting back to the fact that, like we talked about at the beginning, remembering why we're in this industry, we're impacting people's lives. Look for those little moments where you had that impact, and it really can fill you up to keep going during the hard times.
This is so great. I couldn't think of a better way to wrap up the conversation. Barbara, it's been a real pleasure. It's been so great to have you. Thank you. I really appreciate the time that you gave us today. I would hope that we could do a second episode down the road. If you would, if you'll be interested, I would love to do a continuation of this conversation because it's been so great.
I would love to, because we're best friends now that we've spent an hour together. I'd love to. Thank you, Adrian.
I definitely feel that way. Everybody, thank you very much for taking the time to watch our conversation today. I'm Adrian Danila. I'm your host. This is Multifamily Chronicles, and I hope to see you back here soon. Have a great day.